Hello and welcome to the State of the Fleet Market, a weekly video series produced by Automotive Fleet magazine. I'm Mike Antich, editor of Automotive Fleet, and today I'd like to examine what's occurring in the commercial fleet market for the week of July 13th, 2020. And as you analyze the data, the situation for commercial fleets does appear to be improving, and there are several reasons why we say that. One indicator is that 80% of the commercial fleets surveyed now say that they're back to work, and that their fleet operations are operating at near normal levels. A second indicator is that the majority of fleets continue to believe that their businesses will return to normal by fourth quarter 2020 or first quarter 2021. But despite those two positive signs, there are still restrictions in place, in particular travel restrictions, and 70% of the companies say that they do have travel restrictions that are going to extend up through year-end 2020. But as more and more vehicles are equipped with telematics devices, the interesting thing is that the telematics company are now often your best source of industry data. And what amazes me is how dynamic this data is. It's real time, and it can be very granular, looking down to specific industry segments. So as a consequence of this capability, Fleet is now a very good barometer as to the state of the overall economy, as to its business activity, and its vitality. And the new survey tool to get this data is the telematics data. And here's what the telematics data is telling us. Let's look at overall total business miles for commercial fleets. Now, these business miles did hit bottom in April of 2020, but every month since then, we've seen an increase in overall business miles to where, as of June 2020, total business miles is 86% of what it was pre-pandemic in June of 2019. So the trend line is upward, it's positive, but we still have a ways to go before we get to full recovery. The other thing is, when you look at this data in a granular way by industry, there are certain industries that are doing better than others. Some of the industries that are doing well by segment are healthcare services, which does include pharmaceutical industry when you categorize it. Also doing well is food services, biotech, construction, delivery, last mile delivery in particular, utilities, utility services, and anything dealing with infrastructure. When you look at it, all vocational and revenue producing fleets seem to be doing well during this pandemic period. But there is the flip side. There are a lot of industries that continue to struggle, one of which is oil and gas. Other areas that are not doing as well is home healthcare, the retail market, leisure travel, and insurance. And interestingly, in the case of the oil and gas industry, many of the companies in that segment are reacting by extending the service life of their vehicles or even defleeting their vehicles. Another good barometer that's provided by the telematics data is fuel consumption based on the number of gallons purchased, and comparing that to the current month to same time last year. And here things are trending back to where they were pre-pandemic. Another benefit to the economic slowdown that a lot of people don't talk about is that as a result of driving fewer miles, there's been a sharp decline in carbon output by fleets. So sustainability has been one of the dividends that have come out of this economic slowdown. So another good barometer as to what's going to be happening in terms of overall business activity is going to be occurring in the next several weeks, and that's with the second quarter corporate earning reports, which will be released at that time. Companies have had difficulty in recent months in predicting what future business activity is going to be, and to give you an indication of that, over the past 3 months, 400 companies out of the S&P 500 have failed to provide forward-looking guidance as to their business activity. But this will change. There's going to be increased pressure on these companies to provide guidance, and once they start doing so, these are going to be important barometers as to future economic vitality. In another area that is uncertain and that we're going to be spending time discussing in the coming months is the upcoming election, and depending on who wins that election, there could be a real sea change in the amount of environmental regulations that are going to be issued impacting commercial fleets. And there may be a greater push on the part of the government, the federal government, in terms of electrification. And there is even a possibility of government mandates in order to meet these environmental standards, as was the case when the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990 and the National Energy Policy Act of 1990 were implemented. So again, uncertainty, and we'll have to wait to see how all of this transpires. Next, I'd like to examine what's occurring in the wholesale used vehicle market, which is extremely important to commercial fleets. And I'd like to do so courtesy of Donlen, which has provided a chart here breaking out resale activity by vehicle segment. Truck, SUV, vans, and sedans. And as you can see, business activity has been strong. For the past several weeks, auctions have been experiencing sales in that 70 to 80 percentile range of the total vehicles that have been consigned for auction. Prices still continue to be strong. Most auctions still are selling most of the vehicles online, but more and more physical sales are opening. Now, one caveat to that is in the southeastern, southwestern section of the country, where there have been hotspots on reemergence of new infections. Some of these auctions now are restricting the number of dealers that can actually be physically present during these physical sales. But on the whole, resale activity is going strong. It's primarily driven by limited inventory that's out there, and as a result of this limited inventory, it's putting upward pressure on resale values. But one of the key difficulties with this pandemic is that there's no specific endpoint to this crisis. And automotive sales recovery may be more complex than we've originally anticipated. And I remember reading recently a statement that was attributed to Elaine Buckberg, who's the chief economist of General Motors. And in her statement, she said, "The path forward may not be linear, as rising infections in many states may lead to steps backward in the reopening process." And this is very true, and most likely going to be an indicator of what our recovery is going to be like. So with that, that concludes my State of the Industry presentation for the week of July 13th, and I'd like to thank you for listening.